Hello guys, this is your friend Shinobi Nexus 2.0 and we are back in new fanfic. What if Jiraiya actually trained Naruto seriously? Part 2. Only 5 laps today, Naruto. When the blonde had heard those words come out of the white-haired sage's mouth, he almost wept tears of utter joy. It had been a week since Jiraiya had introduced the chakra weights into Naruto's training, but this was the first day in which he wasn't required to do 50 laps for his warm-ups. Being happy was an understandable reaction, yes, but now the genin was beginning to feel different about the whole situation. Naruto, who was currently on his 4th out of 5 laps, was jogging at a very modest pace. This was a far cry from his first day using the weights and he was proud of the progress he was making so far. What is the reason he's only having me do 5 laps? Is something else going on today? Despite the great progress he had been making recently, he was currently unable to enjoy it because of the lighter warm-up. The blonde has known Jiraiya long enough that he rarely does things, if at all, without some sort of reasoning behind it. I guess the only thing I can do is wait and find out what he tries to kill me with next. He thought to himself as a drop of sweat rolled down his temple. This is ridiculous. The angry shout caused the genin's head to snap towards the direction of the offending sound. It was Jiraiya leaned up against a tree as always with an irritated expression on his face. Upon closer inspection, his student noticed that the Sannin was angrily reading through a stack of papers. Wait a minute, the blonde said incredulously. He recognized those papers. That was a copy of the transcript for his book, which had been given to him when he received his publication confirmation letter from Jiraiya's, now also his, publisher. Naruto also noticed that one of his bags was open and many of his things had been removed and were laying on the floor. Steam comically began to pour out of his ears as he stomped over to confront his nosy mentor. Hey, asshole, the blunt boy yelled. What are you doing going through my stuff? You left it all out on the floor. It's gonna get dirty. If Jiraiya was a lot weaker and smaller, Naruto would definitely beat him up. Jiraiya, ignoring the blonde's outbursts how he usually does, matched his anger as he held up Naruto's transcript. What is this? What am I reading? He exclaimed, pointing a finger at the offending text. What do you mean? The genin shot back. This. Jiraiya dragged his finger across every inch of the page for emphasis. While he appeared animated and upset about something, the blonde was unable to determine what he was actually angry about. What's wrong with it? He said irritably. He had put a lot of effort into producing that book and he couldn't help but get a bit defensive when someone criticized it. Especially a giant pervert who only writes smut. Where do I begin? The older man said in exasperation. I'm already a few chapters in. Where's the romance? Or the drama? He rubbed his head in genuine confusion as he spoke, eyes filled what appeared to be a burning passion so intense Naruto could not make direct eye contact with him. How could a student of mine not know the first thing about writing a successful novel? He looked to his ward for answers. Naruto let out an irritated sigh as his anger levels dropped to considerably lower levels. He knew that this was going to happen eventually. After all, it was the super pervert he was dealing with. Pinching the bridge of his nose, he addressed his master's qualms. Maybe there are none of those elements in this story because it is not a romance novel. Exclamation mark. Did that ever cross your mind, perv? If Naruto was being honest with himself, he wasn't that offended by anything Jiraiya had said. If the complaint had been about the overall quality of writing, that would have been a different story. In this case, it was just Jiraiya being Jiraiya, something Naruto wholeheartedly accepted as reality at this point. How am I even supposed to write a novel about romance if I haven't even had a girlfriend, anyway? The sage raised his hand to answer the blonde's question. If the word research comes out of your mouth, I will write a letter to Granny Tsunade and she won't be happy about what I have to say. Jiraiya slowly lowered his hand. Aside from being his usual childish self, Jiraiya was acting a bit strange. To Naruto, what the older man was saying did not match what his eyes were telling him. The Sannin's eyes were conveying a different emotion, one that the blonde was unsure of. Maybe he was imagining the whole thing. The truth was that Jiraiya was trying to hide how he was truly feeling. In actuality, he was jealous of his young ward. The realization that he was jealous of his own student was making him feel a tad guilty. These negative feelings stemmed from the blonde's novel. Initially, Jiraiya did not have high expectations regarding the boy's writing capabilities. However, That completely changed when he got past the first chapter. The book was excellent, not that Jiraiya would ever admit that to anyone. He was incredibly proud of his student for discovering his talents for literature. That was not why he felt jealous. It was the book itself, or, more importantly, what it was about. The only action-adventure book featuring a heroic main character that the Sanin ever wrote was, to put it nicely, not commercially successful. It was a failure. A failure that led him to abandon that genre of writing altogether and, instead, write his romance novels. While his Ika Ika series was a success that made him rather wealthy, Tale of a Gutsy Ninja was something he poured his soul into like no other. He was bitter that people did not receive it as positively as he envisioned. He shook his head in an attempt to relieve his brain of the negative thoughts he was feeling. Looking back down at his protégé's transcript, he allowed himself a small smile. From the very beginning of the story, he had immediately noticed the similarities between its main character and his favorite little blonde. Knowing you, Naruto, I feel that this story may have a similar message to the one I tried to write all of those years ago. Instead of being envious like a bratty child, I'm going to hope that this story makes a difference in the world that I wish mine could have. Naruto, noticing his mentor's sudden change in expression, frowned in confusion. What is it now? He was starting to think that his sensei was bipolar. The man switched from upset to happy faster than Naruto could eat a bowl of miso ramen with extra pork. The weight of the world, why did you pick that for the title? Jiraiya, who was now looking at this disciple, asked with an even tone. Naruto was taken aback by the sudden question. Well, he took a moment to respond while he gathered his thoughts. The hero has to overcome so much, and so many people are relying on him. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person, ya know. He finally answered. Do you ever feel like that? The genin's eyes widened slightly, then he rebounded quickly. What? Of course not. He puffed out his chest for effect. Nothing can ever get me down. I'm amazing, believe it. Proud smile ever present on his face. Jiraiya's gaze remained fixed on his student. It was obvious that while Naruto wished that was the truth, it wasn't the case. With the Akatsuki after him, Sasuke going rogue to join Orochimaru, and Naruto's vow to protect everyone precious to him, there was no genin alive who had more pressure on them than him. Just know that you can talk to me whenever you need it, okay? Sure, voiced with a twinge of awkwardness. He wasn't used to Jiraiya acting like this. Although he wouldn't admit it to the perv, it felt rather comforting to hear him say that. I'm sorry for tossing all of your stuff on the ground, Naruto. The blonde blinked. Would it be okay if I could borrow this, so I can finish it? The sage said, gesturing to his student's novel. Why? The younger Leaf Ninja asked. He hadn't expected that question. You're my student, so I can't in good conscience let you write a second book without giving you critiques on the first. The older author had a toothy grin as he gave the younger novelist a big thumbs up. Naruto huffed. Whatever, if you can find any critiques, that is. He shot back. Jiraiya let out a bellowing laugh and placed the transcript beside him. That's the spirit, kid. He stood up and inspected his student closely. So, how are the weights feeling today? Are you getting adjusted to them? I'm pretty sure that my body is adjusting to the weight pretty well. Raising his arms above his head for emphasis. It's still hard as hell, but I can manage. I was even able to jog the entire 5 laps. The sage raised an eyebrow in response. He expected the boy's progress to be fast, however, he hadn't foreseen such rapid development. Instructing the blonde to complete 5 laps as quickly as possible, he had expected the child to be completely gassed by the end of it. He's not even breathing hard. An amazing feat for sure. Good. Maybe next month I can increase the amount of weight a little. A little? I thought you said you were going to double the weight every time I adjusted to it. There was confusion and relief evident in his voice. Mostly relief. Jiraiya waved dismissively in response. What? Are you crazy? Who do I look like? Guy. Then what was that whole inspirational speech last week for? Oh, that, he said with a mischievous grin. I just enjoy scaring the crap out of you, brat. There was a slight pause. You know, every time I gain a little bit of respect for you, you find some dumb way to make me think less of you. He shook his head in slight disbelief. You're just an idiot, aren't you, pervy sage? Jiraiya hung his head in disappointment. Sometimes, he wished his student would start treating him with the respect a ninja as cool as him deserved. Strength feared by practically every ninja in every village across the entire world, and yet, the respect of his 13-year-old pupil constantly eluded his grasp. You may be a kid, but that doesn't mean your words don't sting. Faint tears were streaming down the older writer's face. With his long, spiky hair, he kind of looked like a depressed porcupine. So instead of trying to console his master, he, being the nice guy that he is, started laughing at him. Okay, Naruto, Jiraiya spoke as if nothing happened. Maybe he was bipolar. Are you ready to start the next part of your training today? That's what I was just about to ask you about. The sage nodded for him to continue. How come you only had me do 5 laps today? Normally I do at least 50 laps and then we jump right into those weird drills you have me do. I'll tell you why, he began. You see, I wanted this first week to be about increasing your body's strength and speed. These two aspects are some of the most fundamental abilities a shinobi should have. The blonde nodded in understanding. However, I don't want to be doing the same thing every day. It is also important that we mix in other aspects of training as well. The body needs time to rest and can't do it if you carry around all that extra weight every day. The blonde was getting excited. Could this mean he was going to learn some super epic jutsu today? Okay, so what are we gonna do today? Voice not betraying his overflowing cheerfulness. You and I are going to spar. The boy's face fell immediately. Spar with Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin. Suddenly wishing he hadn't been so mean to his sensei, the blonde audibly gulped. How exactly is sparring with you going to make me better? You're so much stronger than me. The older man waved off his student's apprehensions. I'm not going to kill you, kid. The reason we're going to spar is, so I can evaluate your taijutsu. Naruto's eyes lit up in realization. So, the weights were for. Exactly. His master confirmed. We're going to build up your strength and speed for while also improving your taijutsu at the same time. He made a quick hand sign. Ha! The genin felt the difference immediately. Since the weights had been activated for 7 consecutive days, he had almost forgotten what his normal weight felt like. Being 300 pounds lighter, he didn't feel heavy anymore. In fact, it was almost as if he was floating. Whoa! He exclaimed. This feels so much better. Bouncing around and throwing a few mock punches and kicks for display. Jiraiya took a piece of paper out of his pocket and began reading off of it. 3 days out of the week you will be working on your strength and speed using the weights. Those days will consist of things similar to what I've had you do for the past week. However, there will also be another 3 days where we will be working on your taijutsu. What about the 7th day? Asked the boy. That, Jiraiya said, turning the paper around to show his ward. Will be a hybrid training session. Naruto squinted as he read his sensei's odd handwriting. The paper had all 7 days of the week written on it. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday were circled, while Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday were enclosed by a square. Lastly, Sunday was enclosed by both a square and a circle. Today was Tuesday, so based on that information he concluded that squares meant taijutsu and circles meant weighted training. What exactly do you mean by a hybrid session? He asked, slightly confused. A little bit of both in one day. Not quite, responded the older man. During hybrid sessions, you'll be practicing your taijutsu while wearing your chakra weights. The blonde's eyes widened slightly. Because of the fluid and explosive movements executed during combat, wearing weights at the same time will help strengthen muscles that you aren't even aware that you have. Quote. If hybrid training is so effective, how come we don't do it every day? While it certainly didn't sound fun, if it got him the results he wanted, then so be it. Ah, good question. The sage acknowledged. It's because of how physically exhausting it'll be on your body. If your body can handle it in the future, we may increase the number of days to 2 or 3, but for now, we'll start with 1. The blonde nodded in understanding. Are you ready? Jiraiya asked as he lowered into a defensive stance. Naruto's face paled slightly. Why do I need to fight you? Why can't I just spar with my clones? If there was an alternative to fighting a Sannin, the boy would most assuredly take it. Jiraiya chuckled, much to the annoyance of the blonde. He wasn't going to get out of this that easily. I need to see your taijutsu firsthand. That way it will be much easier for me to be able to correct your form. Or change it entirely. he mentally added. The young author's eyes narrowed suspiciously. He knew that that wasn't the main reason. The sage could easily watch he and his clones fight and correct his form that way. Sounds like he just wants to mess with me a little. Fine, the student said after a short pause. In reality, he knew that he needed to fix his taijutsu. It was subpar at best. Okay, maybe he was giving himself a little too much credit. He sucked at taijutsu. Jiraiya nodded and lowered back into his stance. While he was certainly going to have his fun, evaluating the boy's hand-to-hand combat abilities were the most important thing at the moment. Oh, and by the way, you can't use shadow clones. Whattt. He shouted incredulously. Why not? His clones were incorporated heavily into his own unique style of taijutsu. Being unable to use his best weapon puts him at an even bigger disadvantage than he was already at. Jiraiya sighed. Listen, kid, you can't always be constantly relying on your clones to do all the work. Voice stern and unbending. Shadow clones are a great tool in your arsenal, but you are using them the wrong way. Naruto was confused. What do you mean the wrong way? They're a crutch. You've been using your clones to hide your deficiencies. Your taijutsu isn't that good, so you use clones to try and overwhelm your opponent. You can't make a Rasengan by yourself, so you use a clone to rotate the chakra for you. He continued. What I want us to do is to strengthen those deficiencies, so you don't have to spend exorbitant amounts of chakra to even out the playing field with your opponent by using clones. Imagine what you could do with all of that extra chakra that wouldn't be wasted on unnecessary clones. While Naruto was slightly hurt by the words, he understood what his master was saying. And he even agreed with him. In reality, when something took too much effort for the boy to completely master, he used clones to patch up the holes in his skill set. It was a habit that he wasn't even aware he had. Jiraiya suddenly disappeared, snapping him back to reality. He appeared in front of the blonde, aiming a kick at his chest. Acting solely on his reflexes, he crossed his arms in front of himself as a guard. The force of the kick, which was much stronger than the blonde had anticipated, sent him tumbling through the air. The ground did little to soften the boy's landing as he skidded to a painful stop. I didn't even see him move. He thought to himself frantically as he began to pick himself up. Don't expect your opponent to just wait for you. The sage was forced to yell due to the now great distance that was between the two of them. You must be prepared at all times. Naruto sighed. His master could be a real slave driver when he wanted to be. This is what I asked for, though. I know I'll get a lot stronger if all of the training is like this. His eyes widened as a shadow appeared at his feet. And it was quickly getting bigger. He contorted his body just enough so that he barely managed to dodge the foot that landed where his body had just been. The sheer force cracked the ground beneath them and sent a small vibration throughout his body. He rolled away and scrambled to his feet as quickly as he could. Without even thinking about it, his hand flew into his signature seal. Realizing that he was about to use his clones, he forced himself to stop, and instead, summoned forth a string of curses. Damn it, he thought angrily while looking at his hands. I really do rely on my clones too much. Is there a problem, Naruto? He heard Jiraiya call out to him. Without even looking up at the sage, he could already see that smug, I told you so, smirk that he would occasionally wear. Naruto clenched his hands so hard that they nearly shook. He always thought that he was a pretty well-rounded ninja, except for his genjutsu. But it turns out that he wasn't. While everyone around him was getting stronger and learning new things, he was stuck relying on the same two techniques to win all of his battles. The Rasengan and Shadow clones. And he couldn't even make a decent Rasengan, or passable taijutsu, without the use of his clones. He was one-dimensional, and he knew it. It wasn't hopeless, though. That's what he was training with one of the Sannin for. A Sannin that already identified something he himself hadn't even thought about. A smirk appeared across his face. I'm finally learning some useful stuff. No, sensei. There's no problem. He knew he needed to get stronger as fast as possible. That meant dwelling on the negative, when it would do him no good, would be useless. Jiraiya's eyebrow rose, but he didn't say anything. Well, more accurately, he couldn't say anything. His student had actually called him sensei for what might have been the first time. He couldn't believe it. He did his best to not mention or make a big deal about it, hoping that saying nothing would finally mean the end of pervy sage. Naruto threw himself at the sage with everything that he had. If he wanted to get even one hit on his master he would have to go all out. With his noticeably increased speed, he aimed a punch at the Sanin's gut. Jiraiya blocked it with an open palm and was almost surprised by how much power was behind it. Not bad, he appraised. But you'll need more than just a little power to beat me. Naruto growled in response to the taunt. Dropping to the ground, he kicked his foot out for a leg sweep. Jiraiya was 2 steps ahead of him and easily jumped over it. Naruto smirked. The blonde twisted his body and planted his arms on the ground. He threw a powerful kick upwards, aimed at his teacher's sternum. It was met by Jiraiya's patiently awaiting guard, but with nothing to resist the force of the kick except for gravity, he was launched into the air. Naruto quickly followed him into the air, trying to capitalize on his slight advantage. Just as he got in reach, the sage recovered and brought his fists down on the stunned Genin's head. Spiraling to the ground with no hopes of stopping, he was barely able to shift his body enough so as not to land on his head. His back slammed into the unforgiving ground, causing a grunt of pain to escape his lips. Picking himself up, he watched his sensei land lightly a few yards away from him. The blonde appeared to be favoring his right shoulder but was otherwise in good shape. Reaching for his kunai pouch, he hesitated. I don't know if I can use kunai or shuriken. Instead, he discreetly took out 2 smoke bombs from his pouch and quickly tried to formulate a plan. Before he could even use them, his opponent appeared in front of him. As I said, don't expect your opponent to wait for you. Startled, the boy accidentally dropped both of the bombs. They went off, forming a rather large cloud of black smoke. Jiraiya, surprised, coughed as he unexpectedly inhaled some of the smoke. Naruto, now aware of where his sensei was, threw several punches and kicks in his direction. Despite not being able to see, Jiraiya parried every single one. The blonde's strikes weren't fast enough and he was able to tell by the shifting of the smoke where they were coming from. Naruto grunted in frustration and leapt out of the smoke. Jiraiya followed in pursuit. He was putting constant pressure on his student. Naruto stopped and feinted with his right hand and threw a straight left at his opponent's chest. The punch was far too telegraphed, and the sage sidestepped it. He retaliated with a knee aimed for his student's gut. With Naruto's increased strength, he slammed his palms down on the rising knee, forcing a surprised Jiraiya to stumble forward. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the blonde launched forward and slammed the top of his head into Jiraiya's chin. Bong! The strike found its mark and Naruto almost began to celebrate, only for Jiraiya to disappear in a cloud of smoke, replaced by a wooden log. Hey! He pointed a finger accusingly at the offending piece of wood. What the hell? No ninjutsu during taijutsu only sparring. Jiraiya, who was walking out from behind a tree, could only grin sheepishly. I don't know what you're talking about, Blondie. The blonde huffed in annoyance at his teacher's dirty trick. He lowered back into his stance but was waved off by his senior. That's enough for now, Naruto. Upon hearing those words, the blonde's apparent fatigue began to catch up with him. He sat down to rest a little. How did I do? There was genuine curiosity in his voice. Considering he was a second away from breaking his teacher's jaw, his performance was better than even his wildest expectations. You did a lot better than I expected, kid. His mentor said with a big grin. Even though it has only been a week, I can already see and feel the difference that those weights have had on your speed and strength. I underestimated you towards the end, there. Naruto nodded in agreement. I definitely noticed a difference too. He looked at the deactivated weights on his limbs with a newfound appreciation. No wonder Bushy Brow was able to get so fast. He said aloud, more to himself than to Jiraiya. However, the sage continued, that doesn't mean that there is no room for improvement. Naruto frowned. What do ya mean? I thought I did pretty good. Jiraiya smirked at his protege's defensiveness. You're too wild when you fight. You have to work on being more patient and controlled. Jiraiya rubbed his chin, thankful he avoided losing some teeth from his dense-headed godson's headbutt. You're very unorthodox, so I think in the future we are going to work on your counter-striking. That, mixed with your unorthodox attacks, will give your opponents fits. I think it's fine the way it is. He grumbled to himself. It's always worked for me before. That was before, this is now. Naruto was startled by the sudden increase in volume. You have S-ranked ninja looking for you, ninja as strong, if not stronger than me. Lashing out and hoping to hit something is only going to get you killed. Naruto, who was about to retort, closed his mouth. The sage was right, and he knew it. With everyone in the Akatsuki potentially being on the same level as people like Orochimaru, he would have to improve drastically in every facet of his abilities. The student sent back a weak nod of confirmation. He was both nervous and excited about the prospect of facing off against the Akatsuki. Remembering his first encounter with Itachi and the man who looked like a shark sent shivers down his spine. Good. The older man responded simply. Naruto shifted, unsure of what was coming next. So, what are we going to do nay? Ha, wah, ah, with the weights now activated again, the surprised blonde crumpled to the ground. What the hell, you bastard. I thought you said no weights today. Naruto struggled to move, quickly finding out he was unable to. And this is way more than the usual weight. He noticed his master's big smile. How can you go from super serious to a big idiot in just a few seconds? Let me up. Jiraiya let out a bark of laughter and wiped a single tear from the corner of his eye, all while ignoring the vulgar language of his student. Man, that never gets old. He said with a wide grin. I said let me up. The angry child repeated. Once you get up, I'll deactivate them. Hurry up, I have a few taijutsu scrolls want to show you. After nearly a minute of watching his ward struggle to get to his feet, he was getting a little impatient. Hey, get up lazy, we don't have all day. His godson just grumbled in response, still valiantly attempted to stand up. If you don't soon, I'm going to increase the weight. How the hell is that going to help anything? -3 months later. Poof. Hey, there's only 5 left. A very beat-up Naruto said proudly after dispelling another copy of himself. You shouldn't be acting so smug. Jiraiya shouted, sitting atop a high tree branch, resting his back against its trunk. You look like total crap. Naruto ignored his sensei and shifted his attention to the 5 remaining clones. He knew his teacher was just messing with him, he was just too exhausted to care. The reason he was so worn out from just battling his clones was that it was Sunday. For the past 3 months, every Sunday consisted of his hybrid sessions, where he would usually fight his clones while weighed down by hundreds of pounds of gravitationally augmented training weights. As he found out before, clones of seals did not abide by the same restrictions of the original, making his shadow clones very difficult sparring partners perfect for his hybrid training. Yeah, one of the Narutos snickered. You do look like crap. The original didn't appreciate that tone in the slightest. He decided the obnoxious one would be his next victim. Lunging, his muscles burned from carrying all of the extra weight for so long, but he ignored it. The punch he threw was rather sluggish and the much faster clone dodged it easily. With all the weight the original was swinging around, blocking proved completely ineffective, something a few poor clones had found out in the beginning. Because of this, they were forced to evade their summoner's strikes. The doppelganger countered with a barrage of fast punches, putting the real blonde on defense. With great difficulty, he was able to block and parry most of the punches. What few blows found their mark were merely light grazes the slower blonde couldn't completely evade. A second clone leapt behind him, hoping to take him out and end the battle right there. The much heavier genin smirked. Just as the clone was about to land on him and declare victory, his target sidestepped and grabbed the surprised clone's arm as he sailed past him. With all of his strength, he swung the clone around and hit the copy of himself he had just been trading blows with. This exchange resulted in 2 very satisfying poofs. 3 left, he thought to himself. 50 clones were whittled down to 3 in just under 2 hours, and the ones remaining did not want to join the other 47. They jumped at him from different directions as a last-ditch attempt to win. Naruto's eyes were wide with fear, and the clones were sure that he would not be able to evade all 3 of them. He wasn't fast enough. Instead of panicking, the blonde simply reacted. Pumping his legs full of his remaining chakra, he leapt high into the air. The clones' eyes widened simultaneously in shock. Unable to alter their trajectory, they crashed headfirst into one another. Poof! Naruto landed on his back with a resounding thud, several feet away from where he had been. He was so heavy that the ground cracked beneath him upon impact. Having finally won, the genin would have let out a cheer if a groan hadn't escaped his lips first. Jiraiya dropped down next to him. I think that's the first time you've beaten all of them. His master said proudly. It's especially impressive considering we only bumped up the weight a week or two ago. Damn it, sensei. His pupil said through grit teeth. Just how much did you increase the weight by, anyway? I think you're at about 14 times gravity, now. Meaning that the weights are totaling around 420 pounds. The sage said after some thought. Naruto, despite the pain he was feeling, smiled in response. I finally beat all 50 of them. I told you I'd do it today. His teacher rolled his eyes in annoyance. You've been saying the same thing for almost 2 weeks now, of course, it was eventually going to come true. The collapsed blonde chuckled. Doesn't matter. I still did it. That you did, he confirmed. And I have to say, using your clones like this was a really good idea. Yeah, I know, the young author said as he got up to his feet. Not only are they worthy sparring partners when I'm weighed down, but I think the experience I get from them is helping me improve my taijutsu that much faster. So far, in the 3 months since he had started his training, Naruto has noticed massive changes in his physique. Once a scrawny, malnourished-looking squirt, he was packing on muscle at an alarming rate. Jiraiya told him that it wasn't only because he was training heavy, but because he was eating more than just ramen. Lean meats and nutrient-dense vegetables were some of the foods the sage insisted his student eat after every training session. However, the genin thought he was just saying that to trick the blonde into eating foods that were better for him. Strength and speed were also something that increased exponentially. When his weights were deactivated on his taijutsu days, he felt light as a feather. Despite that, his punches generated a lot of force. Enough to the point that Jiraiya couldn't lazily block his punches anymore without hurting the palms of his hands. Lastly, his taijutsu was much more polished than it had been before. While it was a far cry from being complete in the Sannin's eyes, he was working on becoming a more patient, counter-striking type fighter, and it was showing. If he kept getting stronger at this pace, he couldn't even imagine what he would be like by the time he returned to the village. Currently, they were using a clearing on the southeastern edge of the Land of Fire, about 20 or so miles from the open waters that would take a person straight to the Land of Water. The sage and student had been there for about 3 weeks, so it was once again almost time to begin to pack up their things and continue on their adventure. Kid. Naruto looked up at his teacher, who was sporting a proud smile. You're coming along great. Naruto put his hands behind his head and returned the smile. So good, in fact, I think you've deserved the rest of the day off. The Sannin made a hand sign, and the blonde sighed in relief as he became several hundreds of pounds lighter. This caused Naruto's eyes to sparkle in gratitude, but his sensei didn't want him to get too comfortable. Don't get too, though. We start right back up in the morning with weighted training. Naruto swiftly nodded in agreement. I'm gonna celebrate with some instant ramen. Now that Jiraiya complained whenever he ate ramen too much, the blonde usually saved it for times he felt were special occasions. That's all you ate for the first month, how do you still have more of that stuff packed with you? His master asked incredulously. I bought a ton of it before we left Tanzaku town. His ward answered simply. Since you haven't been letting me eat it as much, I still have some left in my bag. The blonde realized something of the utmost importance. Speaking of which, when are we going to be camped near a town? I'll need to buy more soon. Funny you mention that, the older man acknowledged. I was thinking that we should head north in the next week. What's north? The land of hot water. More specifically, the village hidden in hot water. Naruto's eyes narrowed. That village was known more as a tourist spot than a hidden village. A tourist spot with a lot of hot springs and pretty women. Hey, he pointed an accusing finger at his sensei. You better not be thinking of perving around when you said you were gonna put all of your attention into training me. The white-haired man began to sob. I wish. His continued weeping was similar to a dog being told he couldn't go for a walk outside. The progress of my next Ika Ika book is coming along rather slowly, by my word is my word, and I intend to keep it. So, that's not what this is for? He asked, still suspicious of his sensei's intentions. It will be perfect for someone whose training is hard as you. Naruto's ear perked up in sudden interest. The hot springs will relax and soothe your body's muscles, allowing you to recover faster. Have you been feeling extra sore, as of late? The blonde rotated his shoulder and grimaced. Now that Jiraiya mentioned it, everything ached. When they had first begun their training a few months ago, he was sore, but not to this extent. Feeling crappy was just something he had grown accustomed to feeling when he woke up in the morning. Actually, yeah, with all the work you've been doing these past months, it's put some wear and tear on your body. However, I don't want us to lower the intensity of your training, because I believe the progress you're making is too good to stop. He explained. A month of using the hot springs after long days of difficult training will give your body some much needed TLC, while we train at the same time. Sounds good to me. It'd be great if we could stop by the land of waves, too. It's on the way and I have some friends there that I haven't seen in a while. Jiraiya was about to reply, but something made him stop. He felt uneasy. Everything in his body was screaming at him that something was wrong. The rate of his heartbeat quickened slightly. What is that? He thought, remaining outwardly calm as not to worry his student. His eyes scanned their training ground, but he could not detect anything. Slowly, the feeling began to go away. He glanced over at his ward, who was already starting a fire to heat the water for his instant ramen. The look of excitement and innocence on his godson's face only further allowed him to calm down. Am I going crazy? We found you, a voice said from the trees surrounding them. Jiraiya, and now even Naruto, were on full alert as several figures busted through the dense forest. What are you doing here? How did you find this place? There were 8 men, each wearing identical black cloaks and different masks that appeared to represent animals. A man with a bear mask stepped forward with a scroll in hand. Lady Hokage recently received an update from one of your contacts. She has requested your assistance on an S-rank mission. The man said with an even tone. Having been recently tasked giving Naruto his full attention while they were away, he relinquished most of his duties regarding his spy network to the village. While he had sent his messenger toads out once or twice in the past few months, he mostly stayed uninvolved and allowed the Anbu assigned directly to the Hokage to meet with his contacts. Couldn't let that rat Danzo get his hands on his network of informants. The Sannin took the scroll and began to open it. I'll ask again, how were you able to find us here? He began to scan the scrolls while waiting for an answer to his question. The Anbu member shifted uncomfortably. It's not every day you have to deal with a displeased Sannin. The Hokage was bad enough. Lady Hokage was very determined in finding you. So determined, in fact, that she asked the toads where you were currently located. We came right away. Pa ratted me out. He grumbled to himself more than to anyone who happened to be listening. Coming back to reality, he continued reading the scroll from Tsunade. His eyes widened. According to one of your informants, there has been some unusual movement by the Akatsuki around the location of the village hidden hot water. I know that you have your hands full with Naruto, but because the hot water village has demilitarized itself as of late, they do not have the manpower to appropriately react to an Akatsuki attack. Also, they know of your reputation and will only settle for you to undertake this mission. I wouldn't have contacted you otherwise. Tell Naruto that I'm sorry, but they are our allies and if the Akatsuki are involved we must act. Jiraiya sighed in annoyance. Guess I wasn't going crazy, after all. He mused to himself. Several meters away, this time unnoticed by Jiraiya, something rose up from the trees in the dense forest outside of the training grounds. When the Sannin stopped moving and began to scan the area he thought he had been found out. Thankfully, the Anbu swooped in like the idiots they are and stopped a near disaster. The strange being eyed the group, eyes eventually falling on a blonde clad in an orange jumpsuit. Face twisted in a cruel smile, his lowered himself back down, disappearing back into the tree. No trace of him left. A man was sitting at a desk drumming his fingers along the table. The man was bald and had black eyes, a black beard, and black eyebrows. Above his right eyebrow and on his right cheek, he has 2 big scars. His attire consisted of a light gray cloak with black buttons. He was staring at a page in a book which had the picture of a much older man with gray hair and glasses. Being there for what seemed like too long, he let out a yawn. He closed the book. Waiting around for something to happen usually made up most of his day. There was a soft click that caught the man's attention. He glanced over at the wall and on cue, a section of the wall fell over. Through it walked a rather tall man, half of his face covered by a gray mask. He had what appeared to be blood staining the left sleeve of his cloak. The bald man's lips curved upward into what appeared to be a small smirk. He recognized this man. You are one of the last people I expected to see. What are you doing here? He had a deep, almost friendly voice. You know, just in the area. The taller man's voice was deep and gruff, differing drastically to the man who remained seated. He wasn't looking at the man who asked him the question, his cautious eyes were too busy scanning the room for potential threats. It was a habit that someone who lived his kind of lifestyle needed to adopt to stay alive. Not out of fear, but necessity. It's just me. I know. Last time you were here, you said it would be a long time before I saw you again. Despite being before an intimidating presence, the scarred man seemed relaxed. That was supposed to be the plan, but some things have changed. Gruff voice betraying no emotion. Changed how? The bald man pressed. Being holed up in this room for most of the day, every day, any kind of conversation or stimulation he could get was much appreciated. I'm on my way to meet someone. The visitor's responses remained vague. It was not because he was trying to hide something, he just was a man of few words. Because I'll be in that area, I was wondering if you had any work for me, Zenge. Is that what you're calling it, now? The man now referred to as Zenge allowed himself a small chuckle. Where is it that you're heading? Southeast. The masked man replied. Zenge was used to this. The man had never been much of a talker. Southeast. I may have one. He reopened the book and began flipping through its pages. Land of lightning, no. Land of water, no. Hidden stone village, no. He said aloud as he looked for the appropriate page. He flipped to the page that he had happened to be staring at earlier. Ah, here it is. He turned the book around so the mysterious visitor could see. It isn't anything too special, but it's something at the very least. The mysterious visitor eyed the page, memorizing it instantly. He never forgot a face. Doing this for so long, forgetting things was something that you just couldn't do. Only 250,000. Had it been any other man, you would have been able to hear the displeasure in their voice, but his tone almost always remained the same. As I said, nothing too special. The bald man repeated. This is all I have in that area. This seems like an easy $250,000. Why hasn't this been taken by someone already? He wasn't wary, just mildly interested. A rather large group of bandits had apparently tried a few months back. A lot of them didn't survive. No one else wants to take it. They think it isn't worth the money. He explained. I wouldn't be surprised if it never got taken. Normally, I wouldn't take something that had such a small reward, but I guess the circumstances are not exactly normal. Zenge chose to remain silent, allowing the much larger man to continue. Tell whoever put it up that I'm doing it, but for $500,000. Zenge could tell just from the man's voice that he was not asking. He should consider himself lucky. If not for me, this work would go undone, even for 500,000. He is lucky I don't charge him more. A drop of sweat rolled down the man's forehead, catching itself in his scarred brow. I will make sure he gets your message. Zenge, despite having a rather friendly business relationship with his current guest, was smart enough to choose his words carefully when around him. He valued his life. Good, was his simple reply as he walked towards the opening in the wall. He stopped walking and turned around. Make it fast, this won't take long. If he has an issue with my terms, well, he and I will have a conversation about it when I'm done. Zenge swiftly nodded as he watched the man walk out and the wall lift back up to close behind him. He breathed a heavy sigh of relief. Such intensity. Location. Southeastern Land of Fire. The blonde genin, who was currently slurping down the last of his instant noodles and salty broth, was watching Jiraiya and the Anbu talk from a decent distance away. He couldn't hear what any of them were saying, but based on his master's expression, it was pretty serious. The sage's expression suddenly changed after reading through a scroll that one of the Anbu had handed to him. I wonder what's going on. Curiosity now piqued. He put down the now finished cup of instant ramen and made his way over to the adults. What's going on? He asked innocently, mild amounts of concern present in his voice. Jiraiya, still processing everything that he was being told, barely heard his protégé's question. He turned to him, absent-mindedly tucking the scroll he had been reading into one of his pockets. He asked before his brain was able to process what was said. Oh, it appears I'm being to an emergency mission from Tsunade. He explained vaguely. Naruto's brow furrowed in confusion. A mission? But Granny Tsunade knows that you're supposed to be training me. Why would she you to a mission? Something seemed a little off to the Uzumaki, but he wasn't sure what. It appears I was specifically requested to handle this mission. It's an important S-rank mission, and since I've completed over 130 S-rank missions, I guess my reputation precedes me. He puffed out his chest, completing his boast. Technically it wasn't a lie, just an omission of the entire truth. Jiraiya is the most prolific and active ninja currently alive in the Hidden Leaf Village. With over 1,000 completed missions under his belt, his abilities are recognized by many across the shinobi world. While upset for their training being cut short, Naruto had the sudden realization that he might be able to tag along with Jiraiya on this super important, high-profile mission. The thought of being able to test out some of the new strength he gained excited him. Jiraiya saw his student's reaction and was quick to shut down that type of thinking. Not a chance, kid. The blonde blinked, his lips curving slightly to form a small frown. This is going to be a dangerous mission. You're only a genin, there's no way you can come with me. The stern look the Sannin gave him quickly crushed his hopes. But, why? He asked in an attempt to persuade his teacher. I've been on dangerous missions before. Why is this one any different? Because I said so. To which the blonde rolled his eyes in annoyance. In actuality, Jiraiya could not let Naruto go on this mission with the possibility that the Akatsuki could show up. Sure, the Toad Sage was confident in his abilities to take on one, maybe two members at the same time, but the risk that more of them could be in the area surrounding the land of hot water made it too risky to bring his godson with him. Besides, even if he could take on Akatsuki members, doing that while also watching out for Naruto's well-being would be a tall task even for him. Also, the Akatsuki being spotted in an area not only too close for comfort to their current location but also where he and the blonde were about to go, made him uneasy. In this instance, caution was necessary to ensure the safety of his ward. Naruto just grumbled something about unfair adults. It shouldn't take long, Naruto. He attempted to reassure his student. Jiraiya was hopeful that all he would have to do is meet with his contact and clarify a few things. This was clearly either a misunderstanding or incorrect information. According to some very reliable intel he received a while back, the Akatsuki wasn't supposed to make much noise for another couple of years. Why would they suddenly move now, of all times? It didn't make sense, especially around the land of hot water. Then, if you're going to go on this mission, what about me? He asked the white-haired sage. You're supposed to be my protection, too. That is why we are here. The Anbu member with a bear mask spoke with a monotonous tone. He seemed to be the leader of the small team of elite ninja. We are the Anbu assigned directly to the Hokage herself. Our mission is to ensure your safety. They had been standing there so silently that the blonde had forgotten they even existed. Naruto looked at the 8 intimidating figures that joined him and his master in the clearing. One, in particular, caught his attention above all of the others. The Anbu member was wearing a mask that resembled that of a cat with green and red markings. The blonde wasn't sure why, but there was something different about him, he could feel it. Similar to the other cloaked figures, however, the cat Anbu exuded a quiet intensity. Even though their seriousness and intensity made him uncomfortable, they looked pretty strong. Strong enough to protect him in case anything goes wrong. The blonde nodded, seemingly content with their answer to his question. So, are you guys taking me to that place? His eyes squinted in thought as he tried to remember where Jiraiya said they were going. The village hidden in hot water. It was Jiraiya's turn to chime in. No, Naruto. When I'm done with this mission maybe we'll be able to go there, but not right now. Why not? The genin asked, slightly disappointed at not being able to relax in the hot spring. Because, we can only stay in one place for so long, remember? If you're there but we aren't doing any meaningful training, then it's just a waste of a great training location. Again, partially truthful, partially deceitful. While that explanation made perfect sense, it was obvious that Anbu bodyguards are not, it was too dangerous for him to be there right now. Well, then where am I supposed to go? We've already been here for quite a bit, isn't it time to move? The blonde made a good point. That was something that hadn't even crossed the sage's mind. He was too busy focusing on the mission just assigned to him. Jiraiya suddenly remembered something his protege had said earlier. You said you had some friends you wanted to visit in the land of waves. To which the blonde swiftly nodded in agreement. You can stay there. It's on the way to where I'm going, so I can travel with you until we reach it. Think of it as a small vacation from all of the hard work you've put in over the past few months. The 13-year-old's eyes lit up. The thought of being able to see Inari, old man Tazuna, and Tsunami almost made him completely forget about the hot water village and Jiraiya's secret mission. Not only that, but taking a break from training for a couple of days was music to the blonde's ears. Jiraiya smiled. Either he knew exactly what to say to his student, or the boy was just really easy to distract sometimes. Let's pack up our stuff, Naruto. Your friends are waiting for you. Shortly after, Naruto and Jiraiya had packed up all of their belongings and set off for the land of waves with an Anbu escort. At first, they moved swiftly in hopes of getting to their destination before nightfall. Now that they were close and making good time, they slowed down their pace to a hurried walk. Student and teacher were walking side by side with the Anbu team split up into two groups of 4. 4 were positioned behind the genin and sage, and 4 were in front of them. Naruto glanced behind him. His gaze was returned by the Anbu member who adorned the cat mask with the green and red markings. This alone shouldn't have seemed out of the ordinary. After all, the Anbu unit was tasked with ensuring the safety of the young blonde. What made it strange was that out of all of the 8 members, the cat was the only one that was staring at him. Is something wrong, Naruto Uzumaki? The masked man said after Naruto had been staring back at him for some time. The way the man spoke caused Naruto to shudder, though he didn't know why. Something about this Anbu member gave him the creeps. No, he sputtered out. Everything is fine, cat guy. He finished lamely after being unsure of what to call him. Call me, Yudo, the man said after a short pause in the same creepy tone. That was odd. To the genin, it almost seemed like the man was unsure of what to call himself. Naruto just nodded weakly as his head snapped back in the direction he was walking. He leaned to his right where his mentor was standing and began to whisper. Do I really have to stay with these guys? Some of them are pretty creepy. He pleaded. The Sannin sighed. Yes, you do. To which Naruto frowned. They aren't that bad, they just take their work more seriously than you or I. Didn't you know that Kakashi used to be an Anbu captain? Really? The blonde asked, completely surprised. Yes, really. There's nothing to be worried about. Kakashi isn't that weird, right? He rested his hand on top of his godson's spiky-haired head. We're coming up on your destination now, so it's time I go meet with my contact. Naruto sighed but nodded reluctantly. Make sure you come back fast so we can start training again. The sage's student mentally berated himself. He wanted to say a lot more than that. What Naruto really wanted to tell his sensei was that he wished him good luck on his mission and that he hoped he came back safe. For some reason, however, his brain couldn't find the right words. Jiraiya chuckled, unaware of the blonde's inward conflict. I will, kid, but don't think that just because I'm away you won't be training at all. The sage flashed a toothy grin. Can't have you slacking and getting rusty while I'm away. Naruto huffed. I know. You told me already, perv. He retorted while crossing his arms across his chest. And remember. Jiraiya's voice grew more serious. Remember what I said. No more than 5 clones for at most 3 hours at a time. Naruto, also growing more serious, nodded in understanding. Good. His master flashed a confident thumbs up. See ya, as he disappeared in a plume of smoke. It would soon be dark out. The sky was a beautiful orange hue as the sun was slowly disappearing over the horizon. If the blonde had to guess, it was about 7 p.m. Due to it being later in the day, the bridge did not have anyone walking on it. Unbeknownst to the Uzumaki, the daytime traffic the bridge saw was filled with those importing and exporting goods out of the village. The money this brought in was substantial. In short, it was a huge success for Tazuna and the land of waves as a whole. The Great Naruto Bridge. The Uzumaki rubbed his eyes, assuming that doing so would cause the words he was reading to change into what they were supposed to be. He opened his eyes back up. They were still the same. He felt something well up in his chest, unsure of what to think or how to feel in this moment. On one hand, he felt honored that the people of the Land of Waves would name the most important thing their village ever produced after his namesake. On the other hand, he felt guilty about it. In his opinion, he was not the most important factor in the struggle against Gato. If anything, they should have named it after Kakashi-sensei. He thought to himself, unaware of how his passion and determination inspired Inari and the rest of the citizens of the land to finally stand up to their oppressor. "Are you alright, Naruto Uzumaki?" One of his personal bodyguards, who wore a mask that depicted a fierce lion, asked. "Why yeah," he sputtered out in response. "Just a little shocked is all. I didn't know that they named this bridge after me." The man named Yudo decided to chime in this time. "Ah, yes. The Black Ops are very aware of the mission you had in this land under the guidance of Kakashi-senpai." The respect he had for the former Special Forces captain was clear in the way he spoke about him. I guess Pervy Sage wasn't lying about Kakashi-sensei being an Anbu captain. The genin thought to himself, slightly shocked that his master was telling him the truth for once. He was about to respond, but something made him stop. A dense fog was beginning to roll in off the ocean. That, coupled with the orange glow from the sunset, triggered brief flashes of events he did not remember to appear before his eyes. So brief that he didn't really understand what was happening. The blonde attempted to reach for those memories again, but they were gone as swiftly as they had arrived. He shut his eyelids, the sudden imagery giving him the beginning of a pounding headache. That's strange. What was that? He felt uneasy, but he was unsure why. "Naruto." A surprised voice broke him from his trance. He began to take in his surroundings. He was staring at a rather large house with a small boy sitting on the steps that led up to the front door. The entire time he had been deep in thought, his feet were subconsciously taking him back to the first place he stayed, that was outside the protective walls of the Leaf Village. "Inari." A big smile appeared on the genin's face. "How's it going, kid?" Naruto. The black-haired boy, still wearing his white and blue hat, rushed over to his friend and gave him a hug. "What are you doing here?" he asked excitedly. Naruto patted Inari on the head and chuckled slightly at his enthusiasm. It reminded him of Kohohamaru. "It's a long story, but I should introduce these guys first. You're probably wondering who they are." He turned around to introduce his team of bodyguards. Only no one was to be seen. "What are you talking about, Naruto?" he asked with a confused expression on his face. "There's no one there." The Leaf Village's #1 hyperactive knucklehead clenched his fists in annoyance. "Stupid Anbu. They could have told me they were gonna do that. Now I look stupid." He was slightly bitter, but he wasn't gonna let that ruin this great day. Naruto simply reached back and scratched his head, letting out an embarrassed laugh. "Never mind, don't mind me. Are you gonna be here long? Do you need a place to stay?" Naruto didn't know it, but Inari idolized him. After all, after the passing of his adoptive father Kaiza, he was the one who got him to believe in the existence of heroes again. "That would be great. Are you sure it's okay? Are you kidding? Mom and Grandpa always say you're welcome here whenever you want." He was beaming. "Let's go inside. It's getting late and I'm sure they want to see you, too." Before he even knew it, Naruto was being dragged inside. Just atop the house, 8 figures landed silently. The Anbu team was under the strict orders of the Hokage herself to not be seen by anyone. They couldn't risk their presence raising any questions or causing any sort of panic. After exchanging glances, they nodded to one another in understanding. They all dispersed in different directions. They would guard the boy by setting up a perimeter until the Sannin returned. After being invited into the house by Inari, he was met with the surprised, but pleased, reactions of Tazuna and Tsunami. Almost instantly, as if a member of the family himself, Naruto was invited to take a seat at the table. Dinner was almost ready and Tazuna was sure there would be much to talk about today. Now Tazuna, Inari, and Naruto were sitting around the dinner table, while Tsunami was finishing preparing the food. All 4 of them were smiling happily. "You know, kid," the old man began, sipping on what appeared to be a glass of some sort of alcohol the genin couldn't identify. "We were all just thinking about when you were gonna pay us that visit that you promised. Although, I was kind of expecting the other members of your team to be here as well. How are Kakashi, Sakura, and Sasuke doing?" "Good, I hope," he finished. bringing the glass to his lips, the ice clinking against the sides of the cup. Sasuke was still a sore spot that he didn't really want to talk about. Though, that wasn't Tazuna's fault. How could he possibly know that? Naruto's face darkened a bit, but no one noticed. Inari was too young to understand. Tsunami had been facing away from them while preparing the food, though she was intently listening, and Tazuna was already getting a bit tipsy. His cheeks were a tad flush. This gave the Uzumaki enough time to recover so he could put on his brave face. They're all doing great. He gave his best attempt to be enthusiastic. I'm sure they would have all loved to come with me, but I'm actually away from the village right now training with he trailed off, unsure of what title to give to Jiraiya. Mentor. He finished lamely. Where is this man right now? Tsunami asked, motherly instinct kicking in. If he's supposed to be your guardian while you're out of the village, shouldn't he be with you? That's where it gets a little complicated. Naruto began to explain. See, he got assigned a super important mission that he said was too dangerous for me to go on. And since we weren't too far away from the land of waves, I asked if it would be okay if I stayed with you guys until he got back. He just dropped you off without saying a word. Tsunami's voice betrayed a touch of sadness. I'm sorry, Naruto, but when he comes to get you, I'm gonna have to teach this man some manners. While she was saying that, she was smacking a rolling pin against the palm of her hand. Naruto laughed awkwardly. It's not like that, he reassured. He left before we even got here. I got escorted by members of the Leaf Sanbu. They aren't very good with conversation, so they're probably watching the house from a distance to make sure I'm safe. Anbu? Huh, Tazuna grumbled. You know about them? Naruto asked. Yeah, funny enough, when requesting my mission from the Leaf Village I wanted to be escorted by Anbu. I heard they were strong, but I was told I didn't have enough money. So I got stuck with you. He let out a bellowing laugh, nearly spilling his freshly refilled glass of alcohol. Naruto's sweat dropped at the old man's actions. Those guys are high profile. How did a squirt like you manage to get watched by a whole team of them? There was a touch of concern in his voice. He cared for the boy, so if he was in trouble, he would help to make sure he was okay. Naruto laughed nervously. Oh, well, you know, it's just precaution. I'm a genin outside of my ninja village. He leaned in and flashed a confident smile. Besides, the Hokage loves me. He didn't want to make them worry, and telling them that an extremely dangerous criminal organization was after him would do just that. Tazuna returned the smile. Oh, didn't know our dinner guest had all of these connections. He teased lightly. Wow, Inari exclaimed. So cool. I bet you're really important in your village. Naruto grinned sheepishly. Well, when you put it like that, I'm pretty great, aren't I? He boasted shamelessly. Alright, everyone. Tsunami caught everyone's attention as she began placing food on the table. While I'm sure we all want to hear about all of the stories Naruto has, he's probably very hungry. You guys remember how much he ate last time he was here? She finished with a small chuckle. Naruto's eyes practically bulged out of his head. Last time he ate Tsunami's cooking, though it was delicious, it mainly consisted of rice and a few pieces of meat and vegetables. This time around, she prepared lobster, salmon, and some delicious-looking meat that looked to be pork. While there was still rice, Naruto was looking at a small feast. A far cry from what felt like a few short months ago. Whoa, was the only verbal reaction he could muster. This stuff looks expensive. Is it really okay if I eat some of this? Slightly worried that he was being a burden, Tazuna patted the boy on the shoulder and gave him a genuine smile. Kid, without you, we would have never been able to eat like this. Of course, you can have all you want. Naruto blinked. He looked over at Tsunami, who was now sitting down with the rest of them, and Inari. They both were also smiling genuinely at him. What do you mean? He asked dumbly. What do I have to do with anything? Because of that bridge, things have changed a lot in this land. Now that people can easily come and go, trading has been prosperous. We have more money than ever before, and because of that my services are highly requested. People can afford to remodel their homes, new tenants want houses built from the ground up. The land has life once again, and it's all thanks to you. The blonde scratched the back of his head awkwardly. Thanks, but I didn't really do all that much. Honest. You did a lot, Inari said seriously. The glint in his eyes struck a chord in the genin. They meant every word they were saying to him. Naruto felt similar emotions to when he left the land of waves the first time welling up inside him. Like he almost wanted to cry. Though he hadn't spent a lot of time in Wave, he truly felt like a welcomed part of the family when he was there. Not growing up with that, it was really nice to have. Even only if it was for a little. Eat, Tsunami gently urged. Naruto nodded, a smile plastered across his face. Thanks for the food, he yelled appreciatively as he began to dig in. After the first bite, his eyes lit up. This is delicious. Jiraiya was pacing back and forth for what had felt like hours. That was probably because he has actually been pacing for hours. He stopped and looked up into the sky. It was the following morning from when he had said goodbye to Naruto and the sun had just risen about an hour ago. The air was fresh and crisp, cool dew covered the grass at his feet. If he was not currently in a state of mild panic, he might actually be able to enjoy his surroundings. He was currently standing outside the gates to the hot water village. After separating from the blonde and pack of Anbu, he set off for the land of hot water at a fairly modest pace. It took him about 12 hours to arrive at the rendezvous point. Not too shabby in his opinion. The part that concerned the white-haired sage was that his contact was nowhere to be found. Naki is a man that the Sannin has known for a number of years. As his source of intel for the land of hot water, they had previously met many times and the man has never been late once. If anything, he usually arrived early even before the man he reported to. Jiraiya saw him as dependable and professional. Not exactly the kind of person he'd want to hang out with or buy drinks at the bar with, but the perfect kind of person to have a professional relationship with. In short, Naki was someone who wouldn't be late without an important reason. A pit was beginning to form at the bottom of the Sannin's stomach. He had a bad feeling that something was going to happen, he just had no idea what. Though unaware of his fate, Jiraiya had good reason to worry about his contact. It was a gruesome scene to behold. The front door had been viciously broken down. He lay collapsed on the floor in the living area of his own home. He had several cuts and bruises adorning his face. The room was trashed, obvious signs of a struggle. Blood was splattered all along the walls. His body was cold, lifeless. And worst of all, it appears his heart had been ripped straight out of his chest. Tsunami, Tazuna, and Inari watched with mild amusement as their favorite rambunctious blonde scarfed down the breakfast that was placed down in front of him. None of it was a match for an intensely hungry, growing boy. Tsunami let out a small giggle at her guest's actions. You know the food isn't going anywhere, Naruto. You don't have to eat so quickly. Her motherly instincts were beginning to kick in once again. After all, the last time she saw Naruto eat that intensely he threw up. Now finished, Naruto put down his chopsticks and put his hands behind his head with his trademark sheepish smile plastered across his face. Sorry, it's just that the food was so good I couldn't help myself. Tsunami smiled brightly from the compliment about her cooking. I'm glad you enjoyed it so much. She replied sweetly. Naruto. Inari chimed in energetically. What are you going to do today? Are you planning on doing some super awesome training? I'm sure he is. Tazuna added in. Someone whose dream is to be Hokage is probably always training, right kid? The tone of his voice was genuine. He sounded like he supported the boy in his grandiose goal of being the fire shadow. You bet. The genin confirmed as he adjusted his headband. I'll probably look around town to see how much it's changed first, then go train. While I love hanging out with you guys, I promised my mentor that I would continue to train while he was gone. To which Tsunami and Tazuna nodded in understanding. I can't start slacking now, can I? Of course not, Tazuna said while slapping the boy on the back affectionately. We can't have the hero of the waves getting rusty. Naruto laughed nervously. Thanks, but I'm no hero, old man Tazuna. Having people refer to him in such high regard made him feel uncomfortable, but he didn't know why. In reality, his childhood was the source of why he did not take well to high praise. Years of being told he was a monster and that he wasn't worth anything really damaged his self-worth and confidence. After all the berating and insults, he had begun to subconsciously accept all of that verbal abuse as fact. Deep down he really believed those awful things and someone telling him otherwise conflicted with the perception of himself that he has had for all of these years. The outward persona of strength and confidence he exudes is sometimes nothing more than an elaborate front that he puts on for the people around him. A Hokage needs those qualities, so he needs to show everyone that he has them. Tazuna just smiled. Walk around town. You'll see what I mean. Before the young boy could have a chance to be angry or sad, Naruto rested a hand on his shoulder. It's okay, Inari. I'm sure one day we can train together. Besides, if you were gone, who would be here to protect your mom? He said with a smile. Inari's face lit back up and he nodded in understanding. You're right, he said with a toothy grin. Hey, it's my day off, I'll be here too. What am I, chopped liver? The older man said with his arms crossed at his chest. The other three laughed at the expense of the old bridge builder and he just huffed in feigned annoyance. After the laughter died down, Tsunami walked over to Naruto and handed him a bento box. This caused the leaf shinobi to blink in confusion. I packed you lunch for when you get hungry, just make sure you're back for dinner, mister. She said affectionately. Naruto, touched by her kindness, nodded profusely in agreement as he headed for the door. I'll be back later, guys. He said with a big smile as he closed the front door behind him. The first thing he noticed about the town was the stark difference in foot traffic to the last time he was here. Before, it had almost felt akin to a ghost town. Now, dozens upon dozens of people were walking around swiftly. Having come later in the evening the previous day, he hadn't been aware of just how much the bridge had changed the quality of life for the people of the small nation. He noticed new houses where there used to be run-down shacks, new businesses where there used to be vacant, unused space. He smiled brightly, happy of what he and his team were able to do. One business, in particular, caught his eye, a small bookstore. More importantly, an advertisement sign located next to the entrance of the bookstore in the large line that appeared to be going out the door. Get a copy of the Hero of the Wave's new novel, The Weight of the World, out now. He read it once, twice, even a third time. The surreal feeling that washed over him was something he could not explain. In all the excitement about being around old friends, he had forgotten that his book was supposed to be released to the public soon. And the people from this small nation appeared to be anxiously waiting to get a copy of his work. He felt tears forming at his eyes, but he refused to cry. This is what Tazuna must have been talking about. A happy-looking customer walked out of the store with his book in hand. The cover of the book was bright orange and the spiral he wore on the back of his jumpsuit adorned the cover. Yep, he thought to himself. I knew that would look awesome. No longer filled with nostalgia, determination and intensity now in its place. All right, let's go. We've been walking for too long. Can we stop for a couple minutes? I need to take a piss. Two figures had been walking down a path in the forest in silence for a long time until one of them finally spoke up. The other simply grunted in annoyance. He had finally gotten his partner to shut up a little while ago, but that, unfortunately, didn't seem to last long. How he hated being around other people. Their presence always interrupting what he enjoyed doing most, being able to be alone with his thoughts. Actually, after thinking about it, there was something he enjoyed doing even more than that. Making money. Didn't I say if you opened your mouth again that I would kill you, Hidan? His gruff voice combined with his harsh and violent words made him come off as a very aggressive and intimidating man. The one named Hidan didn't even flinch. See, Mon, Kakuzu. He said with lazy, half-closed eyes. I know we haven't been partners for very long, but you know as well as I do that you can't do that. So, stop with the empty threats. Kakuzu decided not to further engage in banter with his partner. It would only annoy him further. If you have business to take care of, then get it over with. But I'm not stopping, so you'll have to catch up. That response elicited a sneer from his partner. He ran a hand through his slicked back grayish-white hair and let out a deep breath. Fine, he responded with annoyance in his voice. Just know this, Kakuzu. I'll get you to like me one of these days. He finished as he walked off the path in the direction of a tall tree so he could relieve himself. Despite what he had said, the taller man stopped just ahead and waited for his partner to finish before they continued to their destination. Hidan smirked slightly as he zipped his pants back up. I thought you were gonna leave me behind. You're not such a bad guy, after all, Kakuzu. Shut up, or I'll kill you. Okay, no need to get embarrassed. He teased further. Focus on the task at hand. If you don't take this seriously, we won't succeed. The clear-cut more serious of the two warned. This is important. Don't screw it up. You're not talking about that bounty, are you? The shorter man said with a bit of irritation in his voice. If there's one thing I don't like about you, it's your obsession with money. Money is one of the roots of all evil in this world. HMPH. Says the one whose virtues include slaughtering as many people as you can get your hands on. Not that Kakuzu had a problem with killing. He just didn't want to hear preachings about what he should do from a mass murderer. TCH. Heathen. There was no point in arguing with someone who doesn't understand the way of Jashin. You should know that this isn't just about some bounty. We have more than one target, or were you not listening when I told you? No, I was listening. I just don't see why we have to dirty our hands for something as superficial as money. We need money, was his partner's simple reply. Words of the greedy. The usually aloof partner shot back with a bit of venom. Then greed runs the world. He replied with finality. Hidan crossed his arms around his chest, signaling he too was done talking to his partner. The two of them were now sick of one another's presence and the silence Kakuzu craved returned. They continued along the path that led to their destination. The quietness and solidarity that the forest provided were soon replaced by the loud voices of people. The two cloaked figures walked through the crowds of people as if they weren't even there. Their eyes transfixed straight ahead of them. While they got some odd looks for their strange clothes they were wearing, they went mostly ignored by the busy people who were either working or purchasing things in the marketplace. After what seemed like forever, they suddenly stopped in front of a house. Hidan blinked, but he didn't say anything. He lazily glanced over at his partner. Seems like this is the place, was all his partner said, which made Hidan squint in confusion. I am simply following the orders of the Hokage, Naruto Uzumaki, was his response. Naruto scratched the back of his head awkwardly. Why did Granny tell this guy to watch over me like this? He thought to himself. It seemed strange. What made it stranger was that this ANBU's chakra felt much different from the other Konoha elite. Normally the blonde can't feel chakra radiating off of someone unless they are battling, but he can sense Yudo's. He's not normal. You can just call me Naruto. He decided to keep all of his questions to himself. Not like he would get an actual answer from an ANBU member, anyway. Yudo simply nodded his understanding. The blonde turned back to his training. He put his hand out and began to violently rotate the chakra in his palm. Jiraiya had made him question whether or not he was a true shinobi when he told him that he relied on shadow clones too much. Because of this, the boy has made it his goal to try and turn his shadow clones into a powerful weapon instead of just a crutch he has to use in battle. Improvements in his taijutsu have gone well so far, now he needs to start working on something else. Making a Rasengan with just one hand and no assistance from clones. Focus, he thought to himself calmly. He pushed everything out of his mind and placed all of his attention onto his palm. The ball of spinning chakra began condensing down, rotating even more swiftly. The strain on his face was apparent. I can do it. Boom. Unable to fully contain all of dense, spinning chakra, his Rasengan suddenly exploded. The blast launched him into a nearby tree. He slid down to the ground and let out a groan of pain. Before he could even blink, 6 ANBU landed right in front of him. I'm fine, guys, he grunted out as he picked himself up. He blinked, realizing something. Hey, I thought there were 8 of you. He began counting all of the ANBU he could see on his fingers. 6. Where are the other 2? He questioned. They are currently stationed at the residence you are staying at. The lion-themed ANBU answered. Why? The blonde asked dumbly. If we were all to follow you everywhere you went, if an enemy knew where you were staying, he could simply sneak onto the premises without our knowledge and launch a surprise attack when we returned. Oh, Naruto nodded his understanding. That makes sense. You guys sure are smart. To which all 6 masked ninjas simply nodded. I just don't see why you need to be so cautious. I doubt anything is going to happen. Boom. The genin swung his head in the direction of the blast. His face paled at what he saw. In the distance, a large, black cloud of smoke hung over in the direction that the village was located. He didn't think, his legs just began to carry him in the direction. Taking off full speed towards the village before the ANBU could hold him back. Naruto. Yudo yelled urgently as all 6 Anbu members dashed off in pursuit of the Leaf Village's greatest asset. You can't go over there. The Hokage said. I don't care what Granny Tsunade said. He screamed behind him as he kept running. My friends are over there. Despite his vast increase in speed, the Anbu that were chasing him were still probably faster than him. That he knew. He had to be able to slow them down somehow, so they didn't stop him from going. Shadow Clone Jutsu. He summoned 30 clones, each of which immediately turned back to engage the pursuers. The Black Ops team, shocked that their assignment would resort to such a thing, had no choice but to engage the horde of clones. Hearing a couple clones being dispelled, Naruto gritted his teeth and increased his speed further. That should hold them off long enough for me to get there. They won't be far behind, so they should be able to join me for a fight too. If there is a fight, at all. His mind was racing. What could have happened? Maybe just a gas leak. He tried to reassure himself. No, whatever this was, it gave the blonde a pit in his stomach. Something very bad had just happened, he knew it. Going there was going to be incredibly dangerous. Everything was screaming at him to tell him to stop, but he couldn't. He wouldn't. He was getting closer, his heart rate increasing with every passing second. After the initial explosion, he hadn't heard anything afterward. However, as he grew closer, he began to hear something else. Initially, it was too faint to completely make out what the sound was, but now it was unmistakable. It was screaming. Having finally reached the town, he swiftly scaled the rooftops and leapt from building to building. Now that he was in the town, he could tell more accurately where the cloud of black smoke had come from. His heart sank. No, he saw it. Tezuna's house, the one he stayed at during his first real mission outside of the village, the house who belonged to some of the first people who treated him like a member of the family, had the front side of it blown off. Pieces of debris littered the area and several of the houses around it had been set on fire. He landed, having been so focused on the house he hadn't noticed the 2 figures standing outside of it. His eyes narrowed and a wave of anger he hadn't felt in a very long time welled up inside him. He immediately recognized those cloaks. Akatsuki. The Akatsuki duo turned around, eyeing the new arrival with curiosity. Like a moth to a flame. The masked one said with a voice that gave the blonde chills up and down his spine. Naruto's eyes widened in horror. The one who spoke was cradling something in his arms. He stumbled back a few steps and fell down. This couldn't be happening. He had to be imagining this. This was a horrible, unspeakable dream, right? It had to be. Kakuzu was holding Tezuna's severed head. The bounty hunter glanced down at his prize and smirked beneath his mask. Did you know him? He asked, already knowing the answer. When we came down here to get you, I wasn't expecting my 2 prizes to be in the same place. A bounty and a Jinchuriki. That Zetsu has his eyes everywhere, doesn't he? Hidan said with a little annoyance in his voice. What if he saw me peeing? Naruto didn't hear anything that either of them said. It felt as though the air was forcibly pushed out of his lungs. He was suffocating, yet he couldn't draw in any air. He tried with all of his might to refocus his gaze. The other 2. Where were the other 2? Could he still save them? Were they still alive? Please let them be still alive. The shorter of the S-ranked duo seemed to pick up on the blonde's thoughts. Did you know the other 2 as well? His voice. He sounded like he was enjoying all of this. Naruto heard him, but his mouth wasn't responding to what his brain was telling him. Not out of fear, but despair. He didn't want to hear what the man was going to say next. We were going to leave them alone, they weren't our targets. Hidan began with a shrug. But that kid, he charged at us, spewing some nonsense about being a hero and trying to protect his family. He chuckled, but then his eyes hardened. If the brat hadn't stabbed me, he and his mother would still be alive. Inside the Jinchuriki, the 9-tailed fox was lying down in his cage. With one eye open, he was watching everything that was transpiring outside. He had been mildly interested in what was happening, even contemplating giving the runt a piece of his chakra. However, after hearing the man with gray hair talk, he shut his eye closed, now seemingly uninterested in the whole situation. Naruto just sat there. He expected a boiling rage to overtake him, but nothing had come. The tears that were once streaming down his face had stopped. The searing hot pain in his chest had disappeared. His body was numb. He didn't feel anything. All of his will had been stripped away from him. He just sat on the ground, seemingly resigning himself to his hunters. If I were to die, would this feeling go away? He thought to himself. After having to already overcome so much pain, sadness and terror in his life, the boy may have finally had enough. He was tired. The two Akatsuki, initially expecting a fight, seemed to have understood and began making their way to their target. Just when they were a few feet away, several figures dropped in and surrounded them. They each quickly went through a series of hand seals. Earth style. Mobile core. The earth around the two Akatsuki members rumbled and then dropped them deep down underground. They looked up towards the surface, seemingly uninterested in whatever even happens. They didn't even try to evade. Water style. Water bullet. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. Lightning style. Shock wave. An explosion rocked the once peaceful town as the jutsu made contact with their target. Using that as his signal, one of the remaining two Anbu that didn't engage the criminals swiftly leapt into action. Yudo picked up Naruto and took off in the direction of the bridge, followed closely behind by his remaining comrade. Ignoring the sounds of battle, their only mission was to ensure the safety of the Jinchuriki. Even with 6 members of the Leaf's most elite force of ninja, it was very probable that they didn't stand a chance against this foe. The most tactical option would be to retreat and get to safety. How long do you think they can hold them off? Lion asked Yudo. If they are just as strong as someone like Itachi, I would say not long. Hopefully, I'm wrong, he answered, glancing at the lifeless boy in his arms. His eyes were open, but they were dead and glazed over as if they weren't focused on anything. After crossing the bridge that carried the namesake of the boy they were protecting, they immediately began to head north. This all seems too much of a coincidence, Lion said as he looked behind them to ensure they were still not being followed. I agree. I believe their distraction in the land of hot water was just a ruse to get the boy separated from Master Jiraiya. He concluded. Once they knew they wouldn't have to battle a Sannin, they jumped at the chance to take him. How could they know where we were going to be? Lion asked in exasperation, emotion normally unbecoming of Anbu. Let's just say a little birdie told us. Their eyes widened behind their mask as a voice came from above them. They darted in opposite directions as the Akatsuki that held the long red scythe on his back slashed down at them with it. Don't be a fool, Hidan. Kakuzu berated his partner while still holding his bounty trophy. They're holding the boy. We need him alive. Oh, see, Mon, Kakuzu. Hidan retorted with a sadistic smile. If they couldn't dodge that, then they deserved to die. It doesn't appear that we're going to be able to get away, Kat said as he placed the boy on the ground and got into a defensive stance. It appears that way, Lion added. Give us the kid and we'll make sure your deaths are quick and painless. Hidan threatened. We don't want this to get messy. I've gotten enough of other people's blood on my clothes as it is. Kat ran through a series of hand signs. Wood style. Domed wall jutsu. A dome of wood shot out of the ground and covered the unmoving blonde. Hopefully, that protects him from any attacks. The wood style user thought to himself. Kakuzu wondered aloud. From what I've heard, wood style has been extinct since the death of the first Hokage. Who are you? Kat said nothing as his right arm slowly formed into what appeared to be a wooden mallet. He launched himself at the two Akatsuki. Guess time for talking is over, then. Kakuzu said humorlessly. He's mine, Kakuzu. Hidan yelled as he swung his long scythe at the attacker. The attack hit its mark. Poof! Only for him to turn into a log. Fire style. Dancing flames jutsu. Both partners looked up only to see a wide stream of fire coming down on their heads. Lion had used the distraction to launch a jutsu from above. Water style. Water wall. The water rose up and met the fire, creating a large amount of steam that hampered everyone's visibility. Kakuzu leapt up onto a tree branch while his partner just stood there. Waiting. As if on cue, Lion busted through the fog with a kunai in hand. Wood style. Bind. Before Hidan could even react to the oncoming assault, Yudo bound up his torso and legs with branch-like strands that shot out of his arms. You're mine, Lion yelled as he plunged the sharp blade into the chest of the shorter Akatsuki. Despite blood running down the gray-haired man's face, his facial expression didn't change. Except for when it twisted into a cruel smirk. He grabbed both of the hands of his assailant and pulled him close to him. I hope you're ready for this because I know I am. Twisted smirk adorning his face. Fire style. Searing migraine, Kakuzu said calmly after running through a series of hand seals. He pulled his mask down below his lips and an enormous stream of fire spewed out of his mouth. Aimed right at his partner. Oh no, Yudo yelled as he ran through seals of his own. Wood style. Domed wall. He covered himself in his own protective dome of wood. The blast touched down and singed the outside of the wood wall, but did not break through. Unfortunately for his comrade, he was not so lucky. His horrible screams made the wood-style user grimace darkly. He had to pull himself together. He was the only one left. He aimed an attack right at his partner. Why? He didn't understand. Was it because he was going to die anyway from the wound in his chest? The dome receded and he readied the tanto that had previously been strapped to his back. The red scythe slashed its way through the smoke that the fire had left. Behind it was the crazed face of the man he was sure had been killed. Yudo was just able to parry the strike as he retreated desperately. What the hell is going on here? He thought in shock. How is he still alive? Hidan pressed forward while slashing, causing the Anbu to continue backing up. Desperately forming his hand into a mallet, he wildly swatted the scythe out of the madman's hands. Hidan, mildly surprised, stumbled forward, walking right into the tanto which pierced through his chest. Yudo twisted the blade in his chest in an attempt to ensure the kill. Don't resist. The Anbu warned. Tell your friend to back off, or I'll finish you. Instead of looking fearful, the mortally wounded man began to laugh. Cackle. Even. Yudo was at a loss. Even though the man had a blade through his chest, he could still laugh. What's so funny? He wasn't sure if he even wanted to know the answer. His eyes were crazed. Yudo felt as though he could see the devil himself inside of them. Hidan, just like before, grabbed both of his assailant's arms and pulled him close. You're supposed to be an elite ninja from the Hidden Leaf. Pathetic. You fell for the same trick again. Eyes wide, the Anbu looked up into the trees. The man that completed the Akatsuki duo was already running through hand seals. Mind racing, the Leaf Shinobi tried to think of something to get him out of this predicament. His situation was grim, there was little he could do with his arms tied up. As a last resort, he reared back and used that momentum to throw a devastating headbutt at his opponent, only for him to meet it with equal force. It's over. His Anbu mask shattered from the impact, revealing his terrified face. There was nothing else he could do now. He resigned himself, closing his eyes and bracing for impact. Only it never came. He opened his eyes and noticed that Hidan had a similar face of confusion. So you guys thought you could steal my student right from under my nose, did you? A different voice came from above. Both men on the forest floor looked up at the sound of the voice and their reactions were vastly different. Master Jiraiya. The Sannin was gripping Kakuzu's hand to keep him from executing the jutsu. Although the enemy's face was covered by a mask, you could tell that he wasn't expecting the Toad Sage to show up. You guys made a big mistake. The sage's eyes were hard and unforgiving. The normally laid-back ninja was boiling over with rage. You made me angry. The memorial stone looked nearly the same every time he saw it. His one visible eye glossed over most of the names on it, usually only really focusing on 3 names in particular. The names of his 2 teammates from his Genin squad, Obito and Rin, and his sensei Minato. His eyes shut and curved upward, signaling that he was smiling beneath his mask. Remembering the good times he had with his team helped him numb the pain he felt from losing them. Some days were harder than others, but he managed as best as he could. He opened his eye back up and continued skimming through the names. Considering he was there practically every day he was in the village. He knew most of the names on the stone even if he didn't know all of the ninjas personally. There's a new name on here. He thought to himself somberly. He recognized the name, too. A young Chunin no older than 17 had recently died on a low-tier B rank mission. Apparently, some bandits who had access to jutsu got the jump on him and the convoy he was escorting. There were reportedly no survivors and the culprits were still at large. When do they have the time to carve the names into this? I'm here all the time and I never see anyone else ever around. He wondered, trying to take his mind off of the sad thoughts that come along with visiting the memorial. He looked up at the sky. It was early afternoon and the sun was shining brightly. Hardly a day to stand gloomily at a stone all day, but he had to come and pay his respects to his friends. What kind of person would he be if he didn't? It was his day off, so he was able to come early and had stayed there for several hours. Normally, he would stay even longer, but something was telling him to walk around the village a little bit today. Yeah, that sounded like a good idea. A nice change of scenery would bring his spirits up a little. That something bad might happen. Every time he got called into an audience with the Hokage, he tensed up, hoping that he wasn't going to hear some bad news. It never was, but that didn't keep him from worrying the next time. I wonder what you have been up to, Naruto. He mused as he rounded the last street corner. He glanced up from his book and had to do a double take. There was a line going out of the store. The only time he had ever seen that was when a new Ika Ika book came out. How the Leaf Village adults loved the Sanin's work. His pace quickened, excitement visible in his exposed eye. Would today of all days be the one where he gets his hands on it? That feeling was soon dashed and replaced with confusion. He had been expecting the line to be filled with men his age and older. People who could appreciate the contents of one of Jiraiya's books. But this line had children in it. More importantly, children that he knew. Sakura. He began as he walked up halfway up the side of the line. The aforementioned pink-haired Kunoichi turned around upon hearing her name, along with Hinata, Neji, and Rock Lee. What are you guys doing here? The copy ninja asked as he leaned in close to them. This book isn't something you should be reading. His voice now a whisper. Kakashi's student her head to the side in apparent confusion. What are you talking about, sensei? The other genin shared a similar look. Except for Neji. Neji looked the same as he always did, uninterested in everything going on around him. Why shouldn't I be allowed to read Naruto's book? Huh, was the only response the usually cool and collected Jonin could muster. Upon hearing his perplexed response, Sakura pointed to a sign placed next to the door of the bookstore that Kakashi had missed. Sure enough, it was an advertisement for his knucklehead of student's new novel, The Weight of the World. Naruto, our Naruto, wrote a book. The Sharingan user sputtered out, still in a state of disbelief. That's what I said, Sakura agreed, but Hinata told me that he had a book coming out. Don't you have to get something like that published? How do you think he managed something like that? The Kunoichi was going a mile a minute. She had thought she calmed down about the situation after Hinata told her, but seeing Kakashi caused her to start back up again. The Naruto she knew could barely write a coherent sentence, yet now he was coming out with a professionally published work. It didn't make any sense, but nonetheless, she had to read it. Not only to support her good friend but also because she was overwhelmingly curious about the contents of the book. Is it good? Bad? What is it about? She had to get the answers to all of these important questions. I have no earthly idea. The masked Jonin said while he sheepishly scratched the back of his neck. He turned to the quiet Hyuga. How did you hear about this? He asked with genuine curiosity. Any information he can glean about the situation would help him process what was going on. The shy girl, seemingly unprepared for any questions to be directed at her, blushed and began to twiddle her fingers uncomfortably. I overheard some people mention something about it. She said slowly. The chat had been between a man who worked at the bookstore and a friend of his. In passing, he mentioned the author's name being Uzumaki. The second anything Naruto related is said aloud, the little Hyuga's sense goes into overdrive. She then rushed to confirm the validity of what her ears had picked up. After seeing that it was actually true, she was filled with many indescribable emotions and there was only one thing on her mind at that point. She had to get her hands on a copy of that book. Yeah, Sakura jumped in, saving her friend from any further embarrassment. Hinata told as many people as she could. Team 10 is out on a mission, so they'll find out when they get back. Shino and Kiba had some sort of clan thing that they had to attend. And Tenten is working in her family's weapons shop, so I will bring her a copy, as requested. The green-clad genin who had surprisingly remained silent this entire time boomed. Tenten couldn't miss the chance to revel in Naruto's youthful storytelling. His eyes were set ablaze with a passion that Kakashi only saw elsewhere when he was hanging around Might Guy. He sweat dropped but acknowledged the taijutsu specialist's youth with a swift nod. If he was anything like Guy, if he enabled Lee with anything more than that, he would just keep talking about the prime of people's youth. And you, Neji. Kakashi turned to the only one of the four teenagers who remained silent. This doesn't seem like anything you'd be interested in. The Hyuga prodigy had an interesting relationship with the person that defeated him in the Chunin exams. That's why the copy ninja was curious about Neji's reasoning for being there. The pale-eyed Hyuga grimaced slightly. He had hoped he could get away from this conversation without saying anything. If you must know, I am interested in what Naruto has to say. What do you mean? Kakashi continued to prod. The name of the book. It piqued my interest, he said simply with a hint of finality. That was all he was going to say about the situation. Kakashi smiled with his eye. I agree, he concluded as he snapped his still open book closed with a soft thwack. I think I'll wait in line with you guys and get a copy for myself. Before any of the genin could say anything, someone began yelling. Hey, jerk, a man towards the back of the line said. If you plan on waiting in line, you better get to the back. He warned. No cutting. Kakashi, somewhat surprised at the outburst, smiled weakly and waved a hand out in front of himself in an attempt to defuse the situation. Sorry about that, he used his other hand to sheepishly scratch the back of his neck. He turned back to the students. Guess I'll be right behind you guys. See ya, he concluded as he began to walk towards the back of the line. He sighed. The line was now quite a bit longer than when he had initially arrived. Since I'll be here a while, he mused as he once again took out his precious Ika innocence. Having already read the book so many times, sometimes, although he would appear to be reading it, he was actually instead acutely aware of everything going on around. Sometimes he just liked to use the book as a tool to make himself unassuming, which gave him free rein to survey his surroundings. He was surprised by how many people were at this book release. While, yes, the Leaf Village did not have an as negative perception of the young author as they used to, there were still many within it that still viewed him as an unstable and dangerous monster. And by many, he meant most. It has been the blonde's actions that have been very slowly gaining the attention of some of the townspeople. From his mission in the Land of Waves to his heroic efforts during the Chunin exams, and lastly his role in bringing the 5th Hokage to the village in its time of need. All of these things seem to have convinced a couple of people of just who Naruto is. While he still has an arduous journey for the acceptance of the entire village, he is making small and important strides in that direction. And they, just like all of the boy's friends and loved ones, are curious to see what his novel is all about. If only you could see this for yourself, Naruto. I guess I should be more surprised than I am that you actually wrote a book. But I stopped counting you out a long time ago. That'll be 215 ryo. The polite shopkeeper said. Kakashi reached into his wallet and handed the man the necessary money. Accepting the money, he handed the jonin a bag with the book his student authored. Enjoy. Have a nice day. Kakashi nodded and walked outside. Not exactly the book I was hoping to buy today, but this is definitely a pleasantly interesting surprise. He thought to himself as he reached into the bag. Upon seeing the book, his sweat dropped. Really, Naruto? Bright orange, he said aloud humorlessly. At least it'll be an attention grabber. About time, sensei. The copy ninja looked up from his musing. The little genin had been waiting for him. Except, where did Hinata go? Hinata-sama seemed to be in a hurry after buying the book. As if she had to go somewhere important. Neji answered, slightly confused himself as to where the heiress rushed off to with such urgency. She's probably dying to read Naruto's book. Sakura said knowingly. It was beyond obvious that Hinata had feelings for the hyperactive blonde. Well, to everyone except the boy himself. But it is not going anywhere, right, Sakura-chan? Lee asked with similar confusion to that of his teammate. Tsunade's disciple let out a big sigh. Well, to everyone except Naruto, Lee, and Neji. Today Lord Hiashi has instructed me to watch over Hinata. He began. He too was about to leave. I must go find her. With a swift bow, he left in the direction of the Hyuga compound. Sakura chuckled. He might be dying to read the book too. She shrugged. I don't know, it's hard to read him sometimes. You are not dying to read it, Sakura-chan? Lee questioned. No, it's not that. Sakura waved off. I am, it's just they seem extra interested. Well, I for one am not going to take this sitting down. The busy-browed genin exclaimed. Huh, both Kakashi and his student blurted out dumbly. What was he talking about? This challenge that Naruto-kun has issued. His eyes were once again lit up fiercely with a blazing fire. While I cannot write a book myself, I will still accept the challenge. For every sentence that is in this book, I will do one push-up. And if I cannot do that, I will do one squat for every sentence, and if I cannot do that, all. I think we get the point, Lee. Kakashi said with a chuckle. I'm sure Naruto accepts your challenge. Upon hearing that response, the green-clad boy gave the two a passionate thumbs up with his trademark blindingly bright smile before running off towards the training grounds. Sakura and Kakashi had to shield their eyes so the boy's teeth didn't stun them. It took them a moment to recover, but once they did, teacher and student began walking down the busy streets of the Leaf Village. So, Sakura began. What do you think his book is about? She asked, waving around the bag containing the novel for added effect. Kakashi thought for a moment. If I know Naruto as well as I think I do, my first guess would be that it's about ramen. Most people would assume that he was joking, but he actually wasn't. Naruto really was that obsessed with noodles and broth. The pink-haired Kunoichi giggled fondly. I could definitely see Naruto dedicating an entire book to ramen. She looked at the title of her close friend's work. But not in this case. Her tone a little more even, one could even detect a trace of sadness in it. Yeah, Kakashi agreed, thinking the same thing as her. That title alone told them that this wasn't going to be a funny story about food. It was going to have more substance. To be honest, I think I'm more interested in how he was able to even write a book, Sakura said, apparently still not over how this was even possible. When he comes back, I'm gonna ask him how he did it. I'd be interested to hear that answer, too. Sakura smiled brightly. I'll see you later, Kakashi-sensei. She looked down at the book she was now clutching to her chest. I guess I'm going to go read a book by Naruto. She shuddered. Just saying the words alone felt so surreal she got a slight chill. Not that it was a bad thing, it was just so very strange. Kakashi nodded and watched his little student scamper off. Now he was all alone. I can't be the only one who's not reading it, he thought to himself as he opened the book to the first page. This book is dedicated to Team 7. My first family. His teacher's visible eye widened slightly. He focused in on those words for what felt like 10 minutes. He was fully aware that Naruto grew up with practically nothing. No family, no friends, no one besides the third Hokage he could actually spend any quality time with, and the third was always so busy that he didn't even get much of that. However, despite that, Naruto never complained about any of it to him or the other members of Team 7. The boy always wore the brave face, acting as if nothing ever bothered him. So he was surprised to see such introspective and emotional words. He probably didn't expect us to ever see this. He turned to the next page. Chapter 1. Isolation. Kakashi was stunned. Every word, every page, it felt as though what he was reading was coming to life right before his eyes. Well, now that he thought about it, it was coming to life in front of him. The main character, Menma, held very similar beliefs to his blonde students. They both were caring, optimistic, and confident. Along with their comparable backstories of being shunned and ostracized, it was clear where the author got his inspiration from. There is a key difference, though. Naruto, despite all of his hardships, puts on that impenetrable brave face all of the time. He never wants people to see how he is truly feeling. But in the story, we see all of Menma's struggles. The pressures that are continuously stacking on his shoulders, the sadness his past has left him with, and the loneliness he feels all of the time. All of these factors, plus the antagonists who are trying to steal the very power that has caused him to be isolated, affect his mind. Simply put, an imperfect hero. It's as if this novel is giving us an all-access pass into Naruto's psyche. The copy ninja thought to himself with a touch of sadness. I always knew he had to be dealing with a lot, but I never knew it was to this extent. I wonder if he was even consciously aware that he made a hero so much like himself. Kakashi blinked, then took in his surroundings. It was dark. So dark, in fact, that the streetlights were on, illuminating the dim streets of the village. How long have I been walking around? The usually hyper-aware Jonin thought to himself, slightly shocked at how enthralled he had been in his reading. If he was being completely honest, the masked ninja didn't have high expectations for the book's quality of writing. After all, his student had, by far, the lowest academic tests results in the academy, sans Shikamaru, and that was only because the spiky-haired youth fell asleep during half of his tests. In short, Naruto should have no business writing as well as he does. So that begs the question, what kind of training is Master Jiraiya putting him through?